Good morning, everyone. Nothing quite says hip, trendy, and happening quite like little Jimmy Dickens. Well, believe it or not, there was a time in the late 40s where little Jimmy Dickens was as hot as Justin Timberlake or Shakira or Nicki Minaj is today. It goes to show you how far the sensibilities and technologies that deliver us media have come and have taken us. And we're seeing a similar revolution happen and unfold right in front of our eyes when it comes to television. Just a few years ago, it cost millions to produce even the most mediocre television. And so what did we get? We got oodles and oodles worth of mediocre television. Now, anybody that has a smartphone essentially has a TV studio and a TV screen right in their pocket. So are we on the precipice of yet another revolution when it comes to television, when it comes to journalism, when it comes to the state of media in general? To find out, I thought we'd turn to the man who helped precipitate the first television revolution. He is called by many the father of video journalism. He's certainly the founder of Current TV, the former president and founder of New York Times TV. He's the CEO of RosenblumTV.com. He was my old professor over at NYU. He's been an author. He has more credits than we have time to list in a 4-hour program. Gives me great deal of pleasure to welcome Michael Rosenblum. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the radio with me.
Good morning, Frank. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So you were many years ago a producer for CBS News. I'm wondering if you can describe to our listeners the time that you broke into being a producer for the network news, how expensive it was to make television, and what that led to in terms of the final product.
Yeah, sure. I was a producer at CBS News. I was on Sunday Morning, which is the show is still on the air.
Sure.
And in those days, for us to go out and produce was an incredibly complicated and expensive proposition. You had cameramen, you had soundmen. The gear cost a fortune. A broadcast quality camera is $100,000. An edit suite could cost as much as $1 million. You had a team of 4 people that flew around. It was complicated. It took a lot of time. And the upshot was, I mean, we made nice stuff, and they still make nice stuff at CBS, but it's expensive, and it makes people nervous. So very, very few people get access, and even fewer people actually get to make the stuff. It's a very closed system.
And so then what happened to cheapen the means of production, and what does that mean for the consumer?
Well, like everything else, technology is the driver here. And the first thing that came along, of course, were inexpensive camcorders, and that dropped the price of a camera from $100,000 to a couple of $1,000. And on the heels of that, I started to build television stations like New York One and like Current TV, and we did these all over the world. And we still had, paid reporters carrying the cameras, but we got rid of the cameraman, the soundman, and all that kind of stuff. It was still expensive, and the other problem was access to getting it on the air, because you had to own a cable channel, which, if you followed our sale of Current TV, cost $500 million. That's a lot. Or you need an FCC license, which they haven't given out since 1932. So you were still locked out, and if you wanted to be in the business, you had to either spend a huge amount of money or you had to, go work for a network. The great transformer here, there have been 2 things concurrently, and it's like a perfect storm. First, the Internet now, of course, does video. Anybody who watches Netflix understands that they don't need cable and they don't need broadcast, and you can get video online for free or whatever Netflix subscription is. And Netflix is not the only one who can do this. Amazon, everybody else puts video on. YouTube puts up video. Facebook puts up video. But, Frank, you could put up video if you wanted to, and there's nothing to stop you from doing it.
So for the first time in history, it used to be, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago, people were dependent upon the folks that controlled those signals, be it radio or TV, to reach large audiences. But now, in theory, I, speaking into my mobile phone, can reach even more viewers than the sound of this radio signal can or than Channel 4 can.
Oh, yes, that's right. I mean, just going online, if you want to do television or you want to do just radio digitally online, you are theoretically in 3.8 billion homes instantly and for no cost. Of course, people have to find your URL, but the barrier to entry to get into people's homes has been blown away. The other great transformative thing from the world of video and television, which is where I come from, is iPhones and smartphones. Mm-hmm. Your average iPhone now, I have a 10, but if you have a 6 even, they shoot 4K. which is 4 times high def. So the camera in the iPhone is better than those giant cameras that all those camera crews used to carry around with them. And the phone not only shoots professional video, it also has editing software, which comes with it for free. It does music, it does graphics, and you can go live. You can live stream. In short, your phone is about $10 million worth of equipment circa 1992, and it's nothing.
So essentially, everybody listening that has a smartphone has the ability to be a journalist. And by the way, one of Michael Rosenblum's terrific works is a book called iPhone Millionaire. I can't recommend it highly enough. People should pick it up if they're interested in becoming a journalist with the device that's in your pocket right now. So why, if anyone, can be a journalist, can shoot, edit, and distribute all themselves?
Yes.
Why are networks still paying people like, until 2 months ago, Matt Lauer, $22 million
Yes.
to read words somebody else has written for him, staring into a camera someone else is operating?
Yes, because they're dumb. Because they're locked into a technology from the 1960s and an architecture from the 1960s that they can't get out of. They don't they understand it intellectually. And I've met with every network president in the country in the last 20 years, and they all say the same thing. They say, "You're right, I know, I understand, but." And the but is that they have this huge infrastructure and architecture. It's like turning a tanker, they just can't do it. So, the way that, transitions don't come from big companies changing. Transitions and disruptions come from little tiny companies that come up with a new idea, like Amazon or like Facebook, and, just beat the crap out of the existing. And the television business is an industry that is ready for disruption, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I want to ask you about what you're doing now in terms of what could be the future and maybe the savior of local journalism. But
yes.
one comparison that I've heard you give many times over the years had to do with the comparison of literature, which at one time, just to write, was something that was controlled pretty much exclusively by the monks. But after Gutenberg changed things, it became accessible to everybody. Compare what we saw in the world of printing with Gutenberg and the world of digital video and distribution that we're seeing now.
Yeah, your analogy is exactly right. And again, it's another one of these examples of technology changing anything. Prior to the invention of the printing press, 1450, the only way you could make a book was to do it by hand. It was long, it was laborious, it was done by monks, it took about a year, they were highly professional, they were highly paid. Think of the monks as the Matt Lauers of the 15th century. That's how it was, And they go, "Oh, you want to write a book? Well, you got to deal with this guy over here, and we pay him $22 million a year, but that's the only way to do it." The printing press comes along, and suddenly, bang, anybody and their brother can make books, and it takes very little effort. So you get this explosion. In about 30 years, Europe goes from having pretty much 0 books, except for some handmade Bibles, to having 15 million volumes. In the United States, the printing press is what really drove the American Revolution. Everybody who got annoyed with the British, they just got a hold of the printing press and they started to make. That's where newspapers came from. Newspapers originally was a response to their annoyance. The first papers in this country were made by printers, not professional journalists. So we've now lived 500 years with this piece of technology that allows anybody to publish. So somebody like J.K. Rowling, she's an unemployed single mother living on welfare. She gets an idea for a book, and she can make Harry Potter simply because everyone gets access. If she were an unemployed single mother, living on welfare, with an idea for a TV show, she'd be out on the street with a cardboard box, and they'd take her to a mental institution. If she went to NBC and go, "I got an idea for a show, you got to let me in." So up until now, there has been no barrier in print, and that's why we have millions and millions of books and millions of ideas. There's been a terrible institutional technical barrier to television and video, which is an incredibly powerful medium. But now the advent of the Internet plus smartphones has done for television and video what the printing press did for writing.
So one of the things that in journalism, both television and radio and even print, that I hear people constantly upset about, well, it doesn't matter whether they're conservative, liberal, non-political, it's that it's now more difficult to find out what's happening in your neighborhood than it is to find out what's happening in Russia or Baghdad.
Yes.
Is there a way for us to use the transition that we're seeing in digital video right now and the means of TV distribution to save local journalism and expand the footprint of local journalism?
Yes, well, this experiment that we're initiating in Brooklyn. And we've had one meeting. We have another one tomorrow. But essentially, we went out to East New York and Brownsville, which are grossly underserved parts of New York, as you probably know. And the only time that WCBS or WABC or Fox goes out there is if there's a murder or a killing or a fire. And other than that, the people who live there never see them. So the footprint that they get, their media footprint, is a terrible one. You know, you think of East New York and you think of Brownsville, I'm going to get killed. I'm not going out there. So nobody goes to the restaurants, nobody invests, nobody buys real estate, and even the people who live there have this terrible idea. So we thought, let's go out there and let's find, you know, there's a lot of kids out there making some videos on their phones, but they're all going on YouTube. They're not making any money out of them. Nobody ever sees them. So we went out there and we partnered with an organization called Man Up, and we said, let's build a local television station in Brownsville in East New York for the people who live here. So we had a big meeting, and about 50 or 60 people showed up, and I said, who here has a smartphone or iPhone? Everybody raised their hand. So I said, we have 50 or 60 cameras and edits ready to go, which makes us, Brooklyn TV, bigger than ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, CNN put together. And that's the potential. So now the next thing was to train them. So we have this online film school, video school called thevj.com. We gave them all free tuition to go, and now they're learning how to shoot and how to edit. And my guess is in 15 weeks or so we're going to go on the air, online. We're basing the thing in a coffee shop. We're putting the cameras and studio in the window, and it's an open-door policy, so anybody from the neighborhood could come in. And we're selling advertising to local merchants. And because the cost is so low of producing this thing, local merchants can buy a spot for $10 or $20. The spots are also made by the kids who live in the community with their phones. So the thing's kind of a closed cycle, but now it's local news by the people of Brownsville and East New York for the people of Brownsville and East New York, and the money goes back into the community. And we'll put 50 or 60 cameras on the street where WCBS puts 8 cameras to cover all the tri-state area.
No, that's exciting. It's called Brooklyn TV, and if people want to, once it does launch, if people want to watch it, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, we're going to have, I don't like the idea of putting on YouTube because I'm not interested in it going out to the rest of the world. I want to keep it contained within the community. So the best way to look at this thing is to find it on bktelevision.com. It'll be up in about 3 or 4 months. And also they should go to thevj.com, which will explain in detail how they could do it in their own community.
So if I'm in the Bronx or Queens or even in certain parts of Queens, Howard Beach or Kew Gardens, I could potentially use this same model using these same tools that are at rosenblumtv.com.
Yes. We've already been approached by people in the Bronx who want to do this, and actually approached by somebody in Italy who wants to do this. So we're looking at using the VJ.com and the training there as a tool to allow people all over the world to build their own hyperlocal. And these are not, this is not public access. People get paid for the content. The thing makes profit. The profit goes back. It's a business. But it's a business that's architected based on what the technology is capable of now.
Now, we have a lot of people listening to this program who had aspirations at one time of being a journalist. Maybe some of them even went to school for journalism. And by and large, those folks generally fall into one of 4 categories, whereas they dreamt of breaking stories like the Pentagon Papers and Watergate. Now they're basically doing stories about kittens that look like dogs, or they're working in public relations, or they're struggling to put together a living wage through a variety of freelance gigs, or they're doing something completely unrelated to the field that they aspired to be in. Do you view this Brooklyn TV model as a way for these aspiring journalists to maybe make a living doing what they had aspired to do?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the reason that we're doing it on a community-by-community basis is in the old days when you were broadcasting, you had to get 100,000 people or 1 million people to get an advertiser in because ads on local television, I mean, I did New York One, and, ad space there cost $10,000 for a 30-second spot. But when you shrink it down and you cut the overhead, and you do it with phones and you do it with local people, we turn a profit at, $10 a spot. Now, if we get enough people paying for spots and enough material, then the people who are making the content can get paid for their work. It's no longer the barrier to, you know what the model is, Frank? It's like what small-town newspapers were 20, 50 years ago. And they were very profitable. You know, the whole Gannett thing was a chain of hundreds and thousands of small-town newspapers, and they used to be the lifeblood of small towns. And they got crushed out of existence when television came along. Well, now video is going to replicate what small-town papers did, and on the same kind of business scale.
We're talking with Michael Rosenblum, a CBS News producer turned television revolutionary. And, I think a lot of folks, when YouTube started to explode, really did view themselves as being the next overnight sensation. They'd produce some really compelling content, and then all of a sudden they'd have 1 million subscribers to their YouTube channel, and they would go from the outhouse to the penthouse in a week's time. But for many of them, that hasn't happened. Is it still possible for these folks to use these strategies, be it localization or other strategies that you teach in your video boot camps, to make a living?
Yeah, I think localization, I think, is the way to go. YouTube, you're better off buying a lottery ticket. You know, YouTube people upload 500 hours of video to YouTube every minute, and every once in a while you do get somebody like PewDiePie, who's making $3 million. But 99.999% of people make nothing. I read an interesting statistic the other day that 99% of the people who make money on YouTube make less than $100 a month, and 90% make less than $2.50 a month. So
wow,
it's a fraud. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but the people who make money out of YouTube are the people who own YouTube, not the people who put the content in.
Are you optimistic about the future of media and journalism specifically?
Well, I'm optimistic in that I believe that the technology is going to shatter the existing architecture. Right now, almost 100% of what you see on television or online is controlled by 5 major corporations. And there's something inherently wrong with that. And they're not going to give up their power because, I'm looking out the window looking at, 30 Rock and NBC, and I can go over there and go, you guys should really turn this over to the people. They're not going to do that. But I believe that this combination of the Internet and these smartphones, if people can understand the incredible power that they have in their pockets right now, I believe that can change the entire architecture of the industry.
2 final questions. One is because Americans have been consuming for a good number of years now a steady diet of minimum 4 hours of television a day, you predicted that it would take a TV star to win the presidency. Even though you're not fond of Donald Trump, you predicted long ago that Donald Trump would win the presidency. Now, a couple of other TV stars, Mark Cuban and Oprah Winfrey, are talking about running in 2020. Do you see in the TV age in which we live one of them being able to break through?
Yeah, probably. I think that's the only people who can break through. It's for better or for worse, and I think it's for worse in some ways. The average American now spends 5 hours a day watching television or video on their screens, and an astonishing 8.5 hours a day staring at screens in general, between computers and phones and stuff like that. Unless you have a screen presence, unless you're a screen personality, you're a nobody. I didn't particularly like Hillary, and I can't stand Trump. But I always thought that the reason Trump would win was because nobody wanted to watch the Hillary show for 4 years.
Right. It's great TV with Trump. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. The guy, he cut his teeth. People say he's a real estate guy, but he really cut his teeth on The Apprentice. He learned what an audience likes. And that's America, for better or for worse. So if anybody's going to beat this guy, it's got to be somebody who rates higher. I'm not coming out for Oprah, but she has better ratings than he does. So it's got to be somebody who makes Trump look like they want to cancel the show, essentially what it'll come to.
We had no shortage of bald presidents prior to Americans having a television set. Since majority of Americans have had a television set, we're yet to elect a bald president. You've described JFK. You've said in one column that if JFK was the first TV president, Donald Trump could be the last. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I think that, he's JFK, I wouldn't say he was the first TV president. I'd say JFK was the first guy who looked good on television. Donald Trump is the first one who understood the medium. But he's 70 years old. He doesn't really understand the medium the way a 22-year-old or a 30-year-old does. And so I think that somebody who's much hipper is going to come along as millennials get older and as, people in their 20s get older and getting on the wash of the thing. They're going to look at him and go, it's every TV channel, every TV show that's a hit, in 1 year, in 4 years, is canceled. So I think his show's going to get canceled simply because he doesn't get what it takes to remain hip and au courant. But I think that it's only people who, this really takes me back to the whole notion of taking control of the medium. As long as we're victims of these 5 corporations, they're going to feed us stuff. But if average people take control of the medium and start to make their own stuff, well, shoot, I might find somebody in East New York or Brownsville who's great television but never knew it before, and that's where the future is.
Yeah, a lot of people listening to the show and they're saying, this sounds great. I'd love to produce television content or audio content or something similar. But the talk radio, especially the AM news talk radio demographic, tends to skew a little bit older. One woman called me a couple of weeks ago when I suggested she listen on the app when she couldn't get the radio signal. She said she wasn't into that newfangled technology.
Right, yes, exactly.
If I go to the VJ.com or RosenblumTV.com, is there a way for me, even if I'm not a whiz with a smartphone, to learn how to produce this compelling content?
Oh, yes. Well, it's so simple. One of our most successful, I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but one of our most successful TV stations that we built was RLTV, Retirement Living Television, that we did with Erickson Retirement Homes. It's in 40 million homes. The median age is about 85. But once we got out there as retirement homes, you push 3 buttons and you've made video. Literally anybody can do this.
Well, it's going to be interesting, folks, to see where the next few years takes us. Check out RosenblumTV.com. The man is a television revolutionary. Michael, I hope we can talk again soon.
Frank, I really appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, you're welcome to give me a call at 877-970-2999. That's 877-970-2999. This is Frank Morano on AM 970. The Answer.
I hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to learn more and see more, come and see us at thevj.com. Is that right?